Well, okay, Charlie. I appreciate you coming all the way from New Mexico and taking the time to come and be on the show. You've did a series of trains, and this one was my favorite of the trains. And then there's one that we're going to show at the end, which is that night scene, which I absolutely love. And but let's start with this one. And this one technically is absolutely just painted extremely well. I mean, I sat here before we started rolling and tried to find things that I didn't like about it, and really was almost at a loss for, technically you've really, your colors are muted where they should be. They're, there's a few little things that this is sort of pretty high realism, and I love it, but it's hardcore, like even though, what I love about it is even though it is hardcore realism, it's actually not painted with this little needle brush. You've gone in there, especially when you get up close, you can see where these numbers are different and they're a little sloppy, and you've got, what I call painting ugly or whatever up close, but when you step back, it looks really, it all falls into place and it looks wonderful. So there's not a lot that I can technically point out about this. I like paintings that tend to be a little more brushy than this, but that's not, I've certainly painted paintings that are way tighter than this one, and so it's not like a criticism, it's just a matter of, depending on what you're trying to do. And some of your other ones that we're going to show a little bit more of that loose stroke that I like, that I prefer to this. But in terms of realism, I think this is fabulous. And I think that it's, dead on pretty much. And the only thing I could see sitting here looking at it were just really small things, like the edge of this water tower, the edge there, that black should be a little more milky than that. You made it a little darker, and I've got the source picture here to look at. But there's a little bit of milk in that black, right, and that's what you need to give that distance. And that's a subtle thing. And then the other thing I saw was that if you look at, let's see, where was it? Oh, I remember. So there's this one, do you see these very slight sort of milky, weathered lines in here that are not the intensity of the yellow? So I think that if in any direction, your colors are a little more saturated, they don't quite have that little bit of whatever, and that sort of, paint that's been out in the sun for a long time and whatever. Yep. And that's, big deal, right? That's not a big deal. But that was the one thing I thought was there's some real subtle changes, like especially, like even here on this front edge of this right here, absolutely, that's more of a, not as a strong of a yellow, more of a less yellow color. On the clouds, there's a little bit of this sort of edginess, which is fine. It looks brushy and everything, but because the whole painting's kind of tight, it's sort of like, I like these clouds better than I like, sort of this, over, I don't know. But that, a lot of that's personal taste.
A hard edge instead of a soft edge.
Yeah, exactly.
In here, for example.
Exactly. Yeah, that's absolutely it. It's and the thing is that the more you approach realism and the more you approach, and there's a lot of ways, some people call this realism and that realism, and it's a very much a matter of debate as to what realism is, or even high realism, but this looks very real, okay, and it's high realism in my opinion. And the closer you get to that, the more those little subtle things will distinguish your work from, somebody else's or whatever. It's just that little bit of slight, subtle color, and even if you paint sloppy, if you get the color right, it's yummy, it's good, it's like, it feels, But it's really, you did a fabulous job. I really like it. So let's take this one down and look at the next one.
Okay.
All right, so this one is and you did several trains, but this one is very different than the last, of course. As far as any criticism I have, it's kind of like the last one. I think you did a super job. There's just some real teeny small subtle things, like the way that you did the rocks. And this is something that, I talk about painting abstraction and keeping it abstract. And in all here, it's perfect. I think you did a fabulous job. There's abstraction in color. you know, you've got orange, greens, all these different colors working together. I don't see any pattern in here, even in these sticks. I mean, it's actually a fabulous job of all the way this is all abstract and it's not contrived. Right. But I think that broke down a little bit down here in these rocks. And what I mean is, most of these rocks it's a rock with a black outline around it. You know what I mean? So it's sort of like, you know, little rock, like spot, instead of sort of a lot of them clump up. If you actually look at this, there's a lot more, it's not so much that. In other words, when you look at something, you tend to paint a pattern stronger than is really there, and to make it more organized and more, you know, what's the word, abstract. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You know, I'm sitting here talking about your paintings, and I completely forgot to ask you, because we were talking about it when you got here a little bit. But tell us about your story as far as how you got started painting and everything.
Well, I have to mention drawing because I had a foundation in drawing. I had learned mostly from books.
At what age?
I mean, I never really stopped drawing since, you know, as children like to draw. That introduced me into oil painting, and then I would look at books with pictures of paintings from past centuries. Didn't paint a whole lot until I got into college. I went to college to be an EMT, and I met a teacher there, Adam Grosowski, who had a really sort of cogent methodology as far as how he taught what he taught. That's the point at which I really started taking it seriously, and
So sort of seeing a working professional artist, that's exactly what happened to me.
Right.
Is my father was actually suggesting I get into painting, and it wasn't until I took a trip up to Boston and went into some working professional artist studio that all of a sudden I became very curious. You know, how do you do this, and how do you, you know, and that's when I really, that sort of sounds like similar to what you.
Yeah, seeing the stuff in motion as a lifestyle, that inspired me. The methodology that we learned was underpainting, glazing and scumbling, very indirect building up of the layers. And I learned a lot about composition at that point from Adam. About 5 years ago, I just, you know, I quit my firefighting job and said, I'm going to buckle down, I'm going to try and make this into a career. And then it was I think it was last fall that I found you on YouTube. And so this subject has been bouncing around in my brain since I was in college. I said, I want to do industrial scenes, but I was always working from life. And so it was strategically difficult, so it was a matter of acquiring the technology, the printer, the digital photography has changed everything for us.
Yeah, it's really it's a real, almost a dilemma, you know, when you start thinking about, I mean, the advantages of working from life is you don't have to deal with cameras and printers and laminating and the whole, you know, learning Photoshop, and those things aren't really difficult, but it's a lot of, you know, just the cost to start off. You know, a lot of people just take their cell phone pictures and go get them printed at, you know, at Walmart or whatever, and, you know, use from that and work from that, and that just doesn't cut it. I mean, you know, there's a huge difference between a photo like that and a professional, you know, and when I say professional, I mean just using a decent camera and knowing how to get a good exposure in Lightroom and all that is usually important, but you hate to sort of get into all that technical photography stuff if you're an artist, and so you kind of resist it. But the tool, as a tool for artists, you have to go in and, you know, shoot it manual. Don't, you know, let the settings stay where they are. Keep everything at 0. Don't pump it up. Don't add effects. Don't add hit the vivid button or whatever it is. So those are all things that, you know, I sort of reluctantly am teaching photography a lot of times in my private classes, because, you know, people want to know. But, you know, to be an artist, it'd be nice if we didn't have to deal with all that. But so I kind of think about it like, you know, you buy a camera, it doesn't have to be expensive, and then you, when you shoot, you're not using flashes, you're not using photo lights. We're just putting this, you know, device where our view is, and we're recording what we see. And then we take that and we turn it into art. And you know, some people say, well, if you paint it and it looks just like a photo, then why are you doing, you know, why are you even taking the time or whatever? And that's a whole nother, no matter how, I mean, not one of your paintings, for instance, looks like these source photos. And I'd much prefer your paintings to any of these source photos. So, you know, I don't know what happened there, but that's what art is, right? And so anyway, I've talked about that longer than I need to, but I really liked the painting, and that was really the only issue. And what I like about it, though, and this was there was another train picture that you had sent me, and I saw the same thing, where you've basically just put in this pattern, and up close it just, you know, it doesn't look like it would work, but when you get back, it's perfect because your values are right and your colors are right, and as long as you get your values and your values right, you know, it's going to work. You didn't exaggerate the lines here. There's a nice subtlety, you know. Yeah, so let's look at the next one.
Okay.
Well, all right, this is my favorite of the three of them, and you said you just finished this one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought it because I didn't see this one in the email that you sent me. And first and foremost, what I love about it is the composition and the colors and, you know, just the mood that's created. It's very, just everything about it. I really love it. I think it's just a great painting. I love this orange with the, you know, the blue. You know, there's a color thing. It's not anything that I heard, but I observed in a lot of great paintings. And the color formula or the color rule that I've heard or that I've observed is that if you ever have a strong color with a dirty complement, that seems to work. Now, I don't like rules of composition or anything else, but I think that that's something that I've just noticed. And so here you have this very strong orange with these dirty blue, this little spot of dirty blue and some of these grays down here. And that's makes the color wonderful. You have the purple and the yellow, but really it's that strong orange with this dirty blue grays and the blue here. And I'm guessing, I don't know, you know, color something like color harmony and what works and doesn't work is absolutely a matter of taste. So somebody may, you know, hate these colors, but I really like them. And then let me look at your photo here. You know, this photo is a, you know, it's not glossy and it's got a matte finish on it, so I can't really judge the colors too much, you know, because they're different. There's a little bit more over definition down here in this streets. You know what I mean? You know, these little spots. It's a little more subtle, and you've kind of brought out that little spotty reflection and kind of exaggerated it a little bit, and that's really my only real big criticism on this one. And do you know what I mean by that? And that's really, you know, I've got a whole video on, you know, the importance of asking. When you're looking at your source and you're comparing it to your painting, asking yourself which is more subtle, you know, whether it's a line in the side of a building or whether it's this reflection down here. And you did a really good job, but I just think that still slightly, and that's where wet and wet is great, because you can take that, you know, for here, for instance, and just take a brush, you know, maybe stained with this darker color and just touch it, you know, a few times and bring it down until the point where you're like looking at your source. And if you see that yours is not as subtle, then you got to get in there and bring it down. You know, we tend to want to see it and we want to over define, but you know, those are all things that don't really take away from this painting, and I really love it and really glad you brought it. So I don't know what to tell you. I think it's great. So glad you brought it. And is there anything else that you wanted to ask me in regarding, you know, anything really?
You know, like right now, I've been thinking about it, like, you know, 2018 is like my year for marketing. I'm just really trying to narrow it down. I'm gonna fly out to Manhattan next week, which I've never been, and I'm a little bit intimidated. But I'm gonna go. You know,
only show them your best work. You know, I think that's something that I advise a lot of my students, or, you know, any artist that I come with. You're not my student, but I think that you just, you know, there's nothing wrong. You know, if you've got a body of work, you know, show them your best 7 or 8 or 10, and leave out the ones that you think are subpar. you know, because you're going to be, somebody said an artist is only as good as his worst painting, you know, and that's not true, but it's true in the sense that, you know, have you ever seen a great artist and you just, you know, really love their work and you have all this respect for them, and all of a sudden you see something they painted and it's pretty, you know, amateur, and you lose a lot of respect for them, you know, and that's something that, you know, I mean, it shouldn't be that way, but that's what I mean is you really, you know, there's nothing wrong with saying, look, I've got all this work I've done, and I was never very serious as an artist, but now I'm, you know, this is the work that I've, you know, that I've painted in my new studio or whatever it is, and sort of present yourself as, you know, this is me now. As opposed to getting it mixed up with, well, I did that one painting 5 years ago, and it maybe even was a great composition you love, but it's not technically painted as well. You know, leave that one out. You know, when I first started, the first, you know, 2 years, 3 years, I was all over the place with my paintings. I mean, I would do one still life, and it would just be a radically different style than the next one I would do. One would be like super simple, and you know, and then the other one would have all this clutter in it, and I was just sort of, you know, figuring it out or whatever. But I couldn't, you know, at some point you kind of put all that behind you and say, okay, this is the work that I feel like, you know, you shouldn't be reluctant to not throw away, but put paintings that you don't care for up in the attic in storage or whatever, you know, and get them out of sight. So I don't have any problem with that. So my advice is focus on the quality of your work. And I mean that, I mean, if you want to really survive and make it as a professional artist, I mean, you really got to, you know, go for it. Paint some big, large ones like you have. This one's large, but I mean, really blow people away. You know, do a real project to show them really what you can do. Right. So that, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And then the other thing is, and this is one, you know, that I'm not sure about, but you know, I think that at least me, if I was doing it, I would make myself exclusive, you know. And I don't have a problem with, I don't worry about people copying my work or doing copyright and somebody might steal the image off of a website. It's none of that. It's just that by limiting the exposure of your work, you know, and you can't limit it completely. But like, for instance, if you're going home and you're posting every work in progress shot on Facebook and you know, Instagram and everything, and then you go to the gallery and every painting you show them has already been filtered through Facebook and Instagram, I would think if I was running a gallery that would make you less attractive, you know. Now if you get on Facebook and you post a couple detail shots but you never show the whole painting, or you show just a little bit of this, or maybe you show them one painting a year that's, you know, in the back of your studio or whatever, that you're not going to try to put in a gallery anyway, or you know, there's a fine line between, you know, trying to figure out how much exposure you want in that way and how much to hold back. There's two sides to it, you know, and you got to think about it. So I would say, you know, have a website where you have maybe some paintings that are sold, where you can, you know, scribble your email or your web address and your email on a piece of paper and hand it to a gallery or somebody that's interested. But what I don't think is that I don't think artists need to be professional, or at least appear to be professional marketers, right? In other words, you don't want to be, it just hurts your image. It hurts your image to show up at the unveiling passing out brochures that you've had made up at the, and you know, and everybody knows you went down, and you know what I'm saying? It's better, it's better for other people, at least for it to appear that other people are promoting you and you're not promoting yourself. And so that's all part of, you know, holding back, you know, the paintings that you're not happy with, don't show them to anybody. You know, this is all cultivating your public image. I mean, that's the one thing that you can do, is say, this is what the public's going to see. You know, so only put your 10 or 20 best paintings on your website and leave off everything else. And then when you go to the galleries, you can say, look, these are paintings that are sold or that I did years ago or whatever. But then you can show them your new work, which nobody's ever seen. Never. You know, maybe a little detail shot as you were starting, or you know, something. But anyway, that's kind of, those are general guidelines for managing your career. But those are the things that I think are absolutely still true and will probably be true for the foreseeable future in terms of strategy. When a person with a lot of money walks in, and by the way, The only people buying your paintings, the only people that can afford $5,000 paintings are people with means. And there's certain things you can do, and I don't need to tell you, but I mean there's a certain way you carry yourself with confidence, with passion. I think galleries respect you when you tell them, when they come to you and they say, I got a client that wants a blue painting for their sofa, and you say, I'm sorry, I do my thing, I'm sorry, but I'm focused on what I'm doing with my art, and I don't have time to do that. They're going to respect you for that, So one of the things, and as far as putting a frame on a painting, is I like the aesthetics. I like this frame. It's nice. It's simple. When I first started painting, I used to always just put a simple wood border around. I didn't like, I used to say gaudy frames,
Right.
But now I've learned to appreciate really beautiful handmade frames. I just learned to appreciate them. And so if you take a painting like this and you have it in this frame, and then you take the same painting and you put it in a beautiful $3,000 frame, it absolutely will change everybody's perception of what this painting's worth.
Yep.
And that's another big deal. So what I would do is, instead of getting them all framed, or you're not getting them all framed, but I noticed you had a lot of them framed. Right?
Well, the galleries requiring me to frame them.
Right. So different galleries are different in terms of their rules. But what I would do if I was, like, say I wasn't working with a gallery at all, is I would go and I would get a couple of them framed with big, fat, beautiful, gaudy, and I say gaudy, but like old classical frames that really, one or two of them, and then leave the rest unframed. And that way they look at it and they say, okay, this is the kind of work we're looking at, in this frame. And then, okay, the others will get framed later, whatever. And by the way, I have my own art supply company right here in Austin, Texas, and we manufacture all of our own products. We have a whole line of paint and brush holders, palettes, color checkers, all sorts of things. So go check that out if you haven't at genevafineart.com.